This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
One siege followed by another. That is the situation in Gaza as the Israeli army started closing off the Palestinian territories under the pretext of the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. In the meantime, the Palestinian government offered a simultaneous and reciprocal ceasefire agreement by which the Palestinians would stop launching missiles and Israel would stop its escalated military campaign against Gaza. We leave you with Zuhair Sakala from Gaza.
While Israel continues targeting political leaders in Gaza and threatens with more military escalation against its residents, the Palestinian Authority offered Israel a simultaneous and reciprocal ceasefire agreement to stop the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Israel is responsible for the escalated situation in Gaza. 2 months ago, we offered the simultaneous and reciprocal ceasefire agreement, and we continue to make this offer. But the Israeli government's response is refusal. We confirm that what is happening is the result of the Israeli policy and that we do not have a peace partner in Israel.
It is unexpected that Israel will respond quickly to the Palestinian offer. Until then, Palestinian missiles continue to fall on Israeli towns, despite Israeli threats to escalate its military campaign.
This Zionist enemy wants to terrorize our people, but the Palestinian people who have the will and the strong and unshakable belief will not be deterred by these Zionist threats.
As the aggression continues to increase, Israel imposed a complete closure on Gaza and the West Bank until further notice under the pretext of the Jewish holiday of Sderot. This closure will make the economic situation for the Palestinians more difficult.
The economic situation is very bad and it is getting even worse.
The Palestinian people will not surrender despite the siege.
A year and a half has passed since this unjust siege, accompanied by aggression, killings, arrests, but it seems that Israel has not achieved anything. Also, the Palestinian position has not changed. They have not given up the resistance and they will not stop hating Israel. Zuhair Sakala, Dubai Television, Gaza.
The Israeli city of Sderot is a source of concern for Israel because it is often the target of the Qassam missiles. Today, 13 missiles landed in the city. This increases the pressure on Ehud Olmert's government. He visited the city 2 times in 1 week and inspected the area where an Israeli female settler was killed in yesterday's missile attack. The attack coincided with the meeting between the Israeli Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni and the European Union Foreign Affairs Chief Javier Solana. Livni used the opportunity to reiterate her accusations towards the Palestinian government and held it responsible for the attacks.
Palestinian government headed by Hamas.
The Palestinian government headed by the terrorist organization Hamas is responsible for this unacceptable situation, which must be stopped. So far, Israel has shown self-restraint, but the Qassam missiles continue to hit Sderot city. Israel must defend its citizens.
وهو أمر يفرض علينا التحرك دفاعا عن مواطنينا.
Good evening, Chag Sameach, and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem. The funeral of Shir Friedman, killed last night in a Qassam rocket attack, took place this afternoon in the beleaguered southern town of Sderot. Meanwhile, 3 more Qassams were fired at the southern Negev today. We get more from IBA's Eli Wogelanter.
Residents of Sderot awoke this morning to a new reality. After a week of a heavy barrage of Qassam rockets that destroyed houses and property across the western Negev, the first civilian was killed last night in the latest round of attacks. 32-year-old Shir Friedman was buried at noon today. Friedman was killed and another man was moderately wounded when a Qassam rocket hit a car at a commercial center. The woman suffered injuries to her limbs and stomach and was evacuated by Magen David Adom to Barzilai Medical Center in Ashkelon, where she died from her wounds. Sderot residents said that the rocket alert system was not activated before the rockets landed in the city. Dozens of residents demonstrated in the center of the city following the failed rocket attack and clashed with police. A parade of dignitaries visited last night, including Prime Minister Ehud Olmert for the second time in a week. Deputy Defense Minister Ephraim Sneh also toured the southern city, responding to questions over whether Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh may be a target of an IDF strike. Sneh said that no one in the Hamas leadership is immune.
I don't know who are the political members of the Hamas. I don't see any distinction between the two. Those who incite for terror, those who inspire others to take terrorist actions, they are guilty as the same as the others who hold the Kalashnikovs.
Meanwhile, Hamas has declared that it will next target Ashkelon. In response to concerns over Israel's south, the IDF Home Front Command has distributed pamphlets to southern towns, informing residents on the steps to be taken in the instance of a rocket attack. The government also started to address the problem of providing shelters and secure rooms to the area as police prepare for possible attacks. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
In response to the rocket attack that killed Shirel Friedman in Sderot last night, the Air Force struck a base of Hamas special forces in the Jumblat refugee camp in northern Gaza. Palestinians are reporting that several people were wounded in that attack. Israeli aircraft also bombed an additional target in Gaza City, wounding at least 6. Israeli defense officials, meanwhile, are threatening additional harsh responses. Hamas and other terror leaders in Gaza have reportedly gone underground in fear of Israeli attacks. And today, for the first time since the escalation began a week ago, Hamas officials are beginning to talk about a cessation of violence. Ahmed Youssef, an aide to Prime Minister Haniyeh, said today the Israeli aggression must stop so we can talk about a comprehensive ceasefire. Well, it's no secret that Sderot Mayor Eli Moyal is furious at the government for failing to provide security for the citizens of his town. He told IBA's Eli Wogelanter that the problem is not new, but in fact has been going on for 7 years through successive governments.
As long as there is a Qassams on Sderot, they failed. It's our point of view as citizens. We're not asking for money, we're not asking for different things. We're asking for security. There is no security in here. This is it. All of them, not Olmert government, Ari government, and all the governments before. They don't understand what is the problem in here. They're playing games.
Do you feel they're abandoning you for the north, that they're paying more attention to the
We
north?
feel abandoned for 7 years. It's not now. We feel abandoned since day one, because they didn't react in the beginning properly. That's why they have done a lot of mistakes.
بكم إلى نشرة الأخبار من قناة الجزيرة في قطر.
The Lebanese army announced that it will halt artillery shelling of the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp and that it has agreed to permit an international aid convoy to enter the camp. A spokesman for the Fateh al-Islam group said that it will remain committed to the ceasefire of the confrontations in the Nahr al-Barid camp beginning 2:30 this afternoon local time. Meanwhile, an Al Jazeera correspondent reported that the head of the Fateh movement in Lebanon, Sultan Abu al-Aynain, said that the Palestinian factions will deploy armed forces to prevent any gunfire from being shot from inside the camp.
This was the image this morning, showing violent confrontation followed by shelling aimed at the camp. This was the image in the evening. The Lebanese army responded to Fateh al-Islam's declaration of a ceasefire by saying that the army does not negotiate with terrorists, but that it will commit to halting their exchange of fire. This atmosphere allowed for the first UNRWA aid convoy to enter the camp. However, this atmosphere was preceded by political messages that were sent by Palestinian refugee camps. Here in the Badawi camp, the closest to the Nahr al-Barid camp,
What they are doing to us is they are using Fateh al-Islam as a justification to destroy the camp.
If the Lebanese government is pursuing 100 wanted individuals to have them face justice in Lebanon, do they have to attack 40,000 elderly, women, men, and children?
The notable voices came from the Palestinian leadership within the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
Until now, more than 500 shells have randomly landed inside the camp and have not targeted specific positions of this gang.
As for the army, it struck to its original statement that it will not engage in an exchange of fire. It will protect the country and its citizens. It is pursuing wanted individuals, and it is strongly safeguarding against the possible targeting of Palestinian civilians inside the camp. This position has gained popular and political support.
The army is doing its duty. It cannot do more than this. If the army does anything more, it will end up killing the people.
Perhaps it is too early to talk about the nature of the end of this crisis, but it will affect a number of cases. Most importantly, the case of the Palestinian presence in Lebanon, including the presence of armed men. The security response to Fateh al-Islam was met with Palestinian consensus over preventing the bloodshed of Palestinian civilian refugees. The reality gave the Lebanese army two options: either to overlook the loss of their soldiers and their prestige, or to take a risk of crossing political and humanitarian lines by shedding Palestinian blood in the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp.
An Al Jazeera crew was able to video some of the residents' living conditions in the Nahr al-Barid refugee camp in northern Lebanon, despite the on and off clashes between Fateh al-Islam and the Lebanese army. The images show some of the suffering and the state of terror of the residents during the shelling of the camp for 3 consecutive days.
فوتوا لجوا فوتوا لجوا علينا طلعونا يا عمي ما بدنا صحفي ولا بدنا شيء هلا العيون مين انتم لبنانيه لك ولو طلعونا بمعنى افار عم ضرب طولوا بالكم ما في شيء لك خذوها معكم خذوها معكم خذوها معكم خذوها معكم خذوها معكم سرع لوين نزيه شوينك دور وطلع بدنا مي وبدنا شرب بدنا ناكل ليك قربوا هاكل يلا قربوا قربوا الاكل يلا الله يخليكم احمد ما نزل بالعرض بيتنا احمدنا الله يرحمكم ارحمونا
أهلا بكم من جديد. نبقى مع الوضع اللبناني حيث تعتبر
The 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, including Nahr al-Barid, are considered security islands that are out of the Lebanese government's control. Perhaps the most dangerous implication of the explosion that took place in northern Lebanon is the entanglement of the Palestinians in the internal Lebanese fighting, and the question remains, how long will the armed Palestinians be used by regional powers?
تلوح بها الأطراف الإقليمية.
Recently, Fateh al-Islam group became a central issue concerning Lebanon's internal security. It has gained increasing political attention. Some Lebanese officials say that its presence in Lebanon proves that Syria is involved in Lebanon's internal affairs in order to destabilize its security. The Lebanese opposition, however, claims that the presence of Fateh al-Islam proves that Sunni extremism in Lebanon is linked to Al-Qaeda and that the group has become more powerful after Hariri's assassination. The leadership of the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon are in an unenviable position because they are caught between a rock and a hard place. They have to deal with both the Lebanese government and the Palestinian factions that are linked with outside forces. This comes at a time when other extremist organizations are dispersed throughout Palestinian refugee camps. These organizations were previously involved in clashes with the Lebanese army and the Fateh movement on several occasions. The most prominent of these extremist extremist organizations is Jund al-Sham, whose headquarters is in Ain al-Hilwa refugee camp near Sidon. It is said that this organization has made a coordination agreement with Fateh al-Islam. According to the UN, there are 400,000 Palestinian refugees living in 12 refugee camps in Lebanon. Palestinians living in Ain al-Hilwa, the largest Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, and other refugee camps such as Burj al-Barajne and al-Rashidiyya suffer from many social and economic problems. After the PLO fighters left western al-Biqa' and northern Lebanon, pro-Syrian Palestinian factions tightened their grip on these refugee camps. Some Lebanese still describe the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon as security islands. The third article of the UN Security Council Resolution 1559 calls for disarming Lebanese and non-Lebanese militias. It is unlikely that the government would collect weapons from the militias, settle the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, or force them to leave. Therefore, maintaining the status quo might be the best political option for both the Palestinians and the Lebanese. To avoid political, social, or economic liability, the Lebanese government does not take any role in managing the Palestinian refugee camps and residential areas, except for documenting official refugees and issuing them ID cards and travel documents. There are 21 Palestinian factions who play a role in politics and media from within the refugee camps and Palestinian residential areas. These factions have different ideological and political orientations. The nearing of the International Tribunal Court for Hariri's assassination and the Lebanese army's attack on Nahr al-Barid refugee camp brings to mind what happened on the eve before the break of the Lebanese civil war. At the time, the Lebanese army attacked the Arab League suburbs in western Beirut, and the warplanes of the former Lebanese President Suleiman Faranjiyya hit different locations in Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. This was the beginning of the civil war, which lasted 15 years and which distracted the Palestinians from their main plight by fighting the wars of others.
Lebanese Member of Parliament Walid Jumblat expected that the number of bomb attacks in Lebanon will increase as the Security Council moves to approve a UN resolution regarding the International Court.
Unfortunately, I expect that the number of bomb attacks in Lebanon will increase. However, if we move quickly and firmly, the Lebanese government will be in a better position to stop Bashar and Walid al-Muallim from turning Lebanon into another Iraq. The army must carry out its duties. Every time gunfire erupts in the camp, and every time the gunmen of Fateh al-Islam hide there and open fire on the soldiers, the army must respond. This is indisputable. At the moment, the army is prevented from performing its duties. This means that the government and the army are engaged in a political compromise. I say, is there or isn't there a government? Maintaining security is the responsibility of the government and the army. Also, Palestinian organizations must stop covering up for what is happening in the camp, not by words, but by taking action.
Jumblat accused the Syrian regime of being behind what is happening today in Lebanon.
فوق السجال السياسي لنقول فلنكن جميعا إلى جانب الجيش.
Regardless of the political debate, let us all stand behind the army. Let us open the door for volunteers, and let us strengthen the army so it can fight terrorism. At the same time, let us remove the Palestinian weapons inside the Palestinian refugee camps. Let Mr. Nasrallah come forward and fulfill his promise. This weapon is counterproductive. It is not a Palestinian weapon. There is information that some foreign fighters are being sent from Ahmed Jibril's bases in Al-Baqa and elsewhere to Nahr al-Barid refugee camp. Let us find a proper way to avoid harming civilians in Nahr al-Barid, but this also requires the Palestinian factions, including Hamas and Fateh, to exert security and political efforts. Let us coordinate the effort of the army with the security efforts of the Palestinian factions inside the refugee camps to get rid of terrorism. A long-term war of attrition is not to the benefit of anyone.
الجهد الأمني للمنظمات داخل المخيمات.
مجددا إلى الجزء الأخير من لقائنا بالأستاذ محمود سويد المحلل السياسي. أستاذ محمود، كنا تكلمنا في سياق الحوار والمقابلة عن هوية فتح الإسلام وعن
We continue our interview with Mahmoud Swaid, a political analyst. Mahmoud, in our discussion we talked about the identity of Fatah al-Islam and its relationship with the Palestinians and the issue of weapons. Can we differentiate between one Palestinian and another? Is there a difference between a Palestinian living in Lebanon or Palestine and another who runs a political office in Damascus, where several Palestinian movements are probably organized?
أو حضورا في دمشق، وربما من هناك تعزز تحركات عدة للفلسطينيين.
طبعا هناك لكل مجتمع فلسطيني ظروف مختلفة عن الظروف الأخرى. في فلسطين يواجهون الاحتلال، يعني الشعب الفلسطيني تحت الاحتلال، وللأسف في الفترة الأخيرة.
Of course, every Palestinian society has its own circumstances and conditions. In Palestine, Palestinians are living under occupation, but unfortunately, they recently engaged in internal confrontations with one another. We can't say anymore that Palestinians in Palestine are facing only the occupation, which is their real enemy, but unfortunately, they started to confront each other. In contrast, in Syria, Palestinians were able to assimilate into Syrian culture and life. In fact, Palestinians living in Syria can hold government positions and can do any work they want, of course, with the exception of the right to vote. However, in Lebanon, Palestinians went through good and bad times.
في الواقع تجربة وجود الفلسطينيين في لبنان في فترة ما بعد الهجرة من فلسطين.
The life of Palestinians who immigrated to Lebanon after the Arab-Israeli war was a happy one, but we need to put a question mark next to the word happy, because happiness is hard to attain if you are a refugee. During that period, Palestinians contributed to Lebanon's economy and education. I remember between the 1950s and the 1970s, many of the prominent teachers at the American University in Beirut were Palestinians. In addition, many Palestinians worked in Lebanon as doctors, engineers and professors. Palestinians contributed to Lebanon's development, growth and prosperity. Then the painful experience of the war came, and it brought with it tragic and bitter news. Let's talk about the current situation in the camps. The camps must be reorganized, especially in regard to the security situation. Some propose the formation of a Palestinian force, which is to be armed, trained and run by the Lebanese army. There ought to be a Palestinian or a Lebanese whose job is to run security in the camps and prevent factions such as Fateh al-Islam from taking control there.
وبإشراف الجيش اللبناني ينبغي أن يكون أحد ما لبناني أو فلسطيني مشرف على الأمن في المخيمات، حتى لا تبقى المخيمات مسرح لجماعة مثل فتح الإسلام وغيرها.
لكن حكما الخيط موجود بين الفلسطينيين عندما تستثيرهم القضية.
Palestinians always come together, especially when it comes to issues regarding their national plight. Even when it comes to Fatah al-Islam, Palestinians found themselves opposing it and at the same time defending it.
الدفاع عنه في الوقت عينه.
في الواقع يعني معظم التنظيمات الفلسطينية وخاصة تلك المنتمية إلى منظمة التحرير ليست في هذا الموقف.
In reality, most Palestinian factions, especially those affiliated with the PLO, are not classified in this category. They support the Palestinian official position, which is adopted by President Mahmoud Abbas. They have learned from their previous bad experience, which stemmed from their shortcomings in Lebanon. They also realize that their presence in Lebanon is limited within the scope of their agreement with the Lebanese Authority.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only.